How closely do you follow the industries you make things for? Do you play all the most recent games? Do you read graphic design and creative professional trade publications and websites? And what value is there in that stuff?
Okay, so really, it's like how much content about your own industry do you consume? How closely do you follow it? Who wants to start with that?
I mean, for myself, it's interesting. I don't follow things as closely as people might expect. There's kind of two reasons for that. One is just a time and bandwidth thing. When you're making games, for example, you don't have a ton of time for playing games. I think that there's a certain degree to which we have a responsibility to know what's going on in our industry, and we do play current games, but not as compulsively as someone who's just really a diehard board game fan. And I think, at least for myself as a designer, I feel like that actually makes me a better designer. Like I like knowing what's going on, broadly speaking, in kind of the board game meta. And I actually follow the business side of things more and what's happening on Kickstarters and things like that more than I actually do game design. But I find if I am playing a ton of games, then my designs end up feeling like iterations on what other people are doing.
Yeah, it almost probably has like a bit of a comparative nature to it even.
And I think that's kind of unavoidable.
Yeah.
Like if you watch movies nonstop and then you sit down to make a movie, it's going to feel like the things that you've been taking in all the time. And so it's not that I avoid playing games or like have no idea what's going on or that I'm clueless about the board game space. If, I've lasered in on half the question, but, I do like to leave a little room in my head for my own thinking and my own new ideas, because I find things that are more distinctly me when I'm not putting myself in this corner where I have so much input that there's no room for me to come up with my own stuff.
It's like our conversations we have often about the balance between creation and consumption, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
We can't overconsume or else we won't be able to create what we need to and we'll be out of balance. So
yeah, you're actually hitting on what I was thinking. When you move from being a consumer to a producer or a creator, the lens changes your perspective a lot. And so you don't consume in the way, at least I've found that I don't consume in the way that I used to. I'm a little bit more selective, but I also have a deeper appreciation for things that have been produced and the story I tell myself in my head is I bet that was a lot more work than people get credit for. And so you have a deeper appreciation, but at the same time, because of the depth that you have in your view and your perspective, you can't really spend too much time analyzing every single thing that's out there. And really your focus is still on creating and producing. And so you do a certain amount of R&D and research to get better at what you're doing, because that is your focus. But I think for me, it's hard to go back into the consumer role because I feel such a responsibility on the producer side, which is kind of a myth. I think that's something I probably should take a look at.
I know on my side, the industry that I spend the most time in is social media, and I have to keep my ear to the ground very closely on what's coming through the industry because it moves as fast as it does. Things can change and alter in a day that changes what your strategy is for how you're creating content. I do have to be very mindful about that balance of creation versus consumption. As we all know, I'm sure, it can be very easy to just doom scroll, as Mark likes to call it, and spend most of our time just consuming. And so I know for myself, I have to set specific creativity blocks into that to balance that. But from an industry standpoint, I do have to keep my ear very close to the ground to see what's coming, what new platforms might be coming, and studying those platforms to find out when we should actually be integrating them into a money-making system versus something that we're just researching, et cetera. So I stay very plugged in, but have to really work to maintain that balance.
Yeah, that sounds a lot more like at least on the board game side, the way that we have to approach like the Kickstarter platform or shipping and logistics, like the things change so rapidly that you do need to be really plugged into what's going on. So I do follow many Kickstarters just to kind of see like how's the community responding to what used to be something that everyone loved a month ago, and now everyone has turned on this company on this Kickstarter. Why?
Exactly.
And, yeah.
So that's an important part of the industry to stay plugged in, and you can't do that if you're spending all your time playing games or consuming social media content, or even like, you know, running your little dog's TikTok channel. You know, I can't spend all my time running a dog's TikTok channel and
You'd
get
be
consumed.
so rich though if
This is what dogs do.
little
Shoulder
dogs,
shimmy.
little dogs,
Little
yes.
dog's TikTok channel. Okay,
I know it's
we're doing
similar
fine.
on the design side too. Like I mean, there are certainly we follow other designers and we talk about the work that they're doing, but we have never sat down and had a discussion about like what's hot in graphic design in 2021. Like that's a ticket to just being pedestrian.
Absolutely. In my experience, I started my geekdom much more invested in video games than I was in board games. And so from probably 8th grade through 19 years old, I was every single day consuming not only constant video games, literally eating the games, but I was also constantly listening to video game news podcasts and reading articles and just like watching Let's Plays and watching reviews. And so there was a period of time where I feel like I had my absolute finger on the pulse of the entire video game industry, could tell you about any game that I hadn't played that had come out that year. And so having that be my history makes me feel very like self-conscious about how I do not have that level of like industry mastery, know what every company is doing, know what they're best known for, know what they did to get them on the map. And so coming in and starting to work here, I felt that that I was kind of behind the 8 ball there. And so has kind of spurred me into a state where I am consuming more board game content and looking at Kickstarters, watching videos, watching reviews, so that I can have a better understanding of not only the whole industry but also the general like aura and ethos and the way that everyone conducts themselves and the way that people talk, allowing me to engage in the conversation better. I think it has made me feel like I need to more.
The self-awareness I think I've been developing lately is when I'm looking at what other people are doing, how much of a critical nature comes up inside me about, oh, I wouldn't have made that decision, or that seems weird, versus really kind of trying to set my trajectory towards what's wonderful about that thing, and how much joy I have when I'm looking for something wonderful in something versus, oh, I love all the things, 99% of that's awesome, but I hate this thing right here. And so much of our discourse, especially in social, is about, pointing out flaws. And I just think that there's so much more joy when you're just trying to think about, this is the most wonderful thing I found about this. And I'm not even going to talk about it in context, but this is something wonderful. I find that to be, not only does it give me more joy, but it also leaves me with something inspiring to act on or to be mindful about in everything else I'm doing. It's like, gosh, maybe that game's not for me, and maybe that movie's not for me, but there was this moment or this piece of it or this part of it that I can take with me and kind of, put in my toolbox now. And I feel so much more fulfilled when I take that view. And it's hard because the instinct is immediately like, oh, I don't know why they did that. It's really easy to pick out things that you might have done differently. And that self-awareness I have is basically when I'm doing those different approaches. And anyway, it's work in progress, I guess.
Well, I like the toolbox idea because I align with that very much. The research the time that I spend into researching the industries that I spend the most time in is to me kind of like agility training, it's a tool that you put in your toolbox. It's agility training. It's revving your engine so that when an opportunity presents itself, when you get inspiration about something that you can do, something that you can make, it gives you the ability to pounce on that opportunity, right? We can't pounce on these opportunities if we're not consistently filling our toolbox, if we're not working on our agility. I've been imagining, as we've really coming into the next year, this idea of the metaverse happening. I even like, you hear me like I'm like stumbling over my words thinking about it because I haven't quite developed opinions on it yet.
I know we haven't talked about it yet.
But it is interesting because there's a big opportunity. There's a lot of negativity that can happen there 100%, but there's immense opportunity there too. And I've been spending the last 10 years of my career on social media studying what works well on these stable platforms and waiting for the opportunity for something to come that we can early adopt, because that early adoption of something is usually when you can gain a huge amount of following with much less work than once a platform is established. So
That's why I'm such a tastemaker on Friendster.
King of Friendster.
Friendster.
Not a
My
Friends.
MySpace is huge.
I was going to say, I would have loved to see Mark and Tom's MySpace profiles back in the day. Bring
What's
me back.
MySpace?
Probably still out
Sure.
there.
Just kidding.
Who's on your top 8?